Well, Jim, it is officially NFL free agency season, although Schefter had the line of the year. He said that NFL free agency opened, I think it's Wednesday at 4. It's over by Wednesday at 4 with all the crap that goes on. So we've had an interesting setup already this offseason. We've had lots of movement. We've had head shaking moves. We've had a move that happened and then got taken away, and the greater plan would have really screwed a certain division. So let's dive into these moves here and let's start cataloging what we think is going to happen with them. And let's start at the top with the bottom. And I mean bottom as in growth chart. Um, Kyler Murray has signed a contract with the Minnesota Vikings. So this to me is twofold. One, this to me is twofold. One, they're building a chocolate factory in Minnesota, and two, they don't have any faith in JJ McCarthy. What do you think?
You've got to actually have a backup for him just because you don't know if you're going to get JJ, rookie year before he gets, or I should say, first year before he gets hurt, or if you're going to get nine coming out there. And unfortunately, the only other backup is a guy who's basically about the same height as a 9-year old. Um, you know, realistically. So it, I mean, you've got to put somebody in the room, and I mean, just the strange thing was is that that wasn't even the first major quarterback domino to fall. I mean, we saw Daniel Jones get a big extension with the Colts. We saw the first real domino, if you think about it, was Malik Willis going to the Dolphins. That sets off, the Dolphins release, and that was in the wake of Tua getting released. He goes and signs with Atlanta to compete with Michael Penix. Kyler goes to the Vikings. So it's a very, very weird dichotomy because now you've actually got quarterback competition starting to develop here. You've now got, the backups going around, but you don't have that major guy in free agency quarterback. You still got to figure out what's going on with Rodgers in Pittsburgh. Are they going to bring him back for one more year? Is he going to walk away? How long is he going to drag this out? Because the scary thing is, until training camp opens, he's still got 4 more months to make up his mind realistically. um, 5 if he decides to skip training camp and then just become the day one starter out there. Because honestly, their other options aren't that great just because of the lack of playing time that they have. And that's just not Pittsburgh's MO. But, Kyler to the Vikings, it kind of makes sense because I mean, you and me as Cleveland fans, it's great because it actually kind of gets him out of the Browns discussion because what would you do? You would actually, you know, I put it out on social media. The hilarity would be that you ran a number one overall pick Heisman winner from Oklahoma out of town on a rail, and then you actually replace him. Then you would think about replacing him with another number one overall quarterback Heisman winner out of Oklahoma who's smaller and has character issues and focus issues. So what are we doing here? I mean, at least Dylan Gabriel can't play the position all that well because of his size, but at least he's smart enough to know when to get rid of the ball. He's not a turnover machine.
Very true. Now, we've talked about Danny Dimes, who gets out of New York and has a renaissance. And we talk about now Kyler going to Minnesota, which, by the way, Kevin O'Connell did do a lot of good work with Sam Darnold, which set Darnold up for this year and a Super Bowl ring. Um, but James, did you happen to see the full circle moment that has occurred in the NFL over the last 24 hours?
Are you? I mean, you're not talking Gino going to the Jets, are you?
Yes, I am, James. And I'm saying this for two reasons. One, the fuck is wrong with the New York Jets? And two,
You don't you
hey,
don't you mean don't you mean from the gift that we passed around the goddamn Jets?
yes. And two, I will forward you off the air the exchange between Keith Hernandez and Steve Gelbs on the Mets baseball broadcast the other day because
You're
Hernandez
lucky
was
the soundboard's over there, and I will get it between segments.
hold on, and I'm only saying that because you should hear Hernandez just say to him, Steve, do you need me to take over for you now? Well, let's get to the big move that didn't happen, and that, of course, was the out of left field news of the 2 first-round picks going to the Las Vegas Raiders for Max Crosby, from the Baltimore Ravens. And let me put it to you this way: Joe Burrow may die because even though that didn't happen, and of course, they didn't like something with the medicals. He had his knee scoped or something, right? Am I correct
Yeah.
in that?
Yeah, late in the year, he had a knee scope.
Yeah, so and they didn't like something coming off the medicals. But here's the real scary piece. They pivot and sign Trey Hendrickson away from the Cincinnati Bengals to put on the end of that line. And according to what I told you the other day and what I was reading, their plan was to trade for Crosby and sign Hendrickson the whole time.
Yeah, but instead now you end up keeping the picks, and then you only give up 4 years, 112 million for Hendrickson, who's a top 5 pass rusher in the league, and I don't know what's worse if you're Joe Burrow or any of the other quarterbacks in that division. The fact that you had Crosby and now pivoting to Hendrickson, who's really got a huge chip on his shoulder because you and I talked about it is, Cincinnati had has nobody but themselves to blame because they have a history in that organization of not paying defensive players. It's always been the offensive side of the ball. James Brooks, Ickey Woods, Boomer Esiason, Chris Collinsworth, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, TJ Hujomama. They've got a history of just paying these guys on the offensive side of the ball and letting the defense rot. They never really have. I think the last guy who got paid on defense was Tim Crumry.
And he got paid on defense because he broke his leg in a Super Bowl.
Right.
Now they paid Pac-Man. They paid Pac-Man a little bit.
You had to pay Pac-Man because that was the only way he was going to stay out of friggin' jail.
That's true. Um, but all kidding aside, is this the most talented defensive division in the league?
I'd say by name, yes, but we also have to keep in mind Hendrickson going to Baltimore improves them a little bit, but they're not going to be the dominant force that everyone thinks because their pass rush is dog crap. It is. I think I saw the numbers that they were the second worst pass rush in all of football, or they were in the bottom 5 for sure in terms of the sacks, the quarterback pressures, and that's why Baltimore took had the nosedive that they did from the year prior is because they couldn't get any pressure. They couldn't, sure, you can force turnovers until you're blue in the face, Lamar being injured and then Derrick Henry getting injured. It was just a bad year for Baltimore. Watch them turn and run away with the division this year because Pittsburgh's not gotten any better. Cleveland damn sure has gotten has they've got nowhere to go but up. And we'll talk about them here in a couple of moments with some of the minor moves that they've made to be able to shore themselves up for the draft. But um the idea that Trey Hendrickson going to Baltimore automatically propels them into the stratosphere of being contenders in the AFC. I don't see it.
I see Baltimore being a more of a contender with Hendrickson for this reason. Yes, they could not get pressure on the quarterback, and that was the big thing with them. But also at the same time, they didn't have a pass rusher like Hendrickson last year. Plus, now, and I think this is where Crosby not going there is going to be a godsend for them. You now have they're picking at 21, 18, 19, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to get a pass rusher in the first round. So between Hendrickson and the draft, I think Baltimore can fix the rush issue very easily, and not for nothing. But if you're picking in the mid to late teens, early 20s, you're going to fix it on the cheap because you're not going to pay
Baltimore
as much you're paying.
Baltimore's picking at 14.
They're going to get a pass rusher. Watch them go pass rush at 14 because Lamar's got some weapons. You've got Derrick Henry. Your own line is still pretty good. Yeah, they're going pass rusher and they're going to team him with Hendrickson. That's actually that can propel them, especially with Kansas City not knowing about Mahomes yet.
and especially with
That's
Kansas City
pretty
picking
big.
in the top, picking at 9.
Dude,
Well, here's the other thing, and I'm not saying this to be homerish, but I think also the Crosby scenario is not done yet because I think now that that got nixed, they may still be looking to move him even though he penned that very nice open letter to the fans of Las Vegas with the Raiders and then, to an extent Oakland as well for the time that he's been there. But I also think it opens up the possibility because we remember before free agency started, there was a lot of scuttlebutt and a lot of rumor about him being moved for almost the same type of draft capital to Buffalo. So I'm wondering if that conversation opens again as well.
it's possible. I've heard Chicago is big with this, that the Bears wanna make a splash with this. The other thing we're not talking about, you brought up Kansas City, the Super Bowl MVP is now in the backfield for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Mhm.
I mean, that's dude, you're giving him that kind of run game? That's insanity. And of course, not really free agent news, but Travis Kelce re-ups for another year. As I kick the table again.
Thank you, Taylor.
Do you really think she'd say no, though?
I mean, you gotta figure she's probably gonna have another leg of her tour and everything, so it just kinda makes sense for, him to be more stable, get that one more year, kinda ride off, have his farewell tour, and then she can actually take a year or 2 off if she wants to. He's retired, he could follow her out on the road everywhere. They could have the lavish lifestyle, get prepared for the wedding and everything, just the one more year of normalcy. I mean, as we turn into, entertainment weekly here for the next minute.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think you and I both thought he was going to come back for one more year, especially after the year Kansas City had. May know something we don't. Maybe Mahomes is ready for the opener. Who
Yeah.
knows? Um, any moves stick out to you as something you didn't expect seeing?
Um Not particularly. I mean, a couple of smaller moves here or there, some role players. I mean, there's really, naturally the quarterbacks are going to be the ones to get most of the rub. We talked, I think the Malik Willis one being the domino falling, but I mean, remember, here's a guy who was actually brought into, to compete in Tennessee. And by the way, have you seen the new Titan uniforms that were launched yesterday?
It really
I
does look like a butt plug.
The logo, yes, but I gotta say, them leaning that far into the old Oiler mentality, I think it's kinda nice to see that look again. It's just weird seeing it in Tennessee as opposed to Houston.
Yeah, it's very weird. And if they try and sue the University of Houston again, they ought to be slapped. Um, but yeah, no, I like the look. I always liked that look. I mean, going back to the mid '90s when Eddie George was drafted by them, I liked that. And then of course they moved to Tennessee and what have you. Um, I don't know. I still find a little disrespect in the color scheme, but
Yeah, it's because somebody brought it up in one of the comments on a message board that they actually said, here's, Tennessee rage baiting Houston for the last 30 years. We took your franchise, now we're taking your color and we're basically throwing back to your identity at this point. And hey, we've been to a Super Bowl, you've never been to a conference championship game. So it's kind of funny in that aspect. But I mean, we also have the Falcons coming up with their new uniforms in 3 weeks, before the draft. So I'm wondering if they're going to start leaning back into the old, I don't want to say they're going all dirty bird, but I'm actually hearing they may go black with the old red helmets, kind of and modernize it a little bit more. But I mean, we could actually set that up on another show, and naturally we'll see them at the draft, when they hand those out. But I mean, realistically, the Willis move was the most surprising for me. The one move that you're going to talk about now with teasing for possibly next week's show was a bit of a surprise, but the more you sit back and think about it, it may not be as big as we think.
yeah, and the move Jim is talking about is that Mike Evans, for the first time in his career, is no longer a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Um, we are working on a guest to discuss this in more depth because, and in wanting to discuss it in more depth for this very reason. This to me feels like when Jerry Rice ended up with the Raiders. Obviously, I'm not saying Mike Evans is as good as Jerry Rice, but it's you have a decade plus relationship with a team where you're setting records, you're doing amazing things every year. You have one down season due to injury, and then all of a sudden you're on another team. As much as we love Benchwarmer Brand, he did ask a question: Why is Mike Evans, who's a little injury prone the last couple of years, going to the team that was the most injury prone team in the league last year? But if you look at it from the 49ers standpoint, you're adding Mike Evans to the stable of studs that Brock Purdy's going to have to throw to.
Yeah, but you got to think that now that finally Brandon Ayuk gets his wish and gets out.
Yeah, I think he does, but still, you still have a pretty damn good stable of weapons out in the Bay Area to go with a really good defense that Robert Saleh is still coaching. So the champs better watch out. If this works and guys stay healthy, San Francisco is going to be a pretty nasty team going into next year.
And we have to finish talking about some of the moves that the team that we follow closest, and that would be the Cleveland Browns. And they didn't make very many moves. Devin Bush signs with the Bears. The Browns sign an edge rusher that I believe was with the Saints last year for a couple of years, for a 2-year contract. But they actually addressed some of their big needs on the offensive line. They announced that they're cutting Jack Conklin after 6 years. Still what I want to say maybe a year or 2 left on them. I think he played one fully healthy season his entire tenure there. So they end up signing Zion Johnson, the guard away from the Chargers. They signed guard slash center Elton Jenkins from Green Bay, who was a 2-time Pro Bowler. Johnson was the Chargers' first round pick in 2022. And then they trade with Houston for Titus Howard, who's I believe a tackle. I believe he spent a lot of last season as right tackle, but can play a little bit of left. And he was Houston's first round pick in 2019. So the Browns actually go out and they fill three big needs on their offensive line where they had not one under contract. And then there was the other story that former Browns first round pick Jed Wills is now back in the NFL with a 1-year deal somewhere else. He could be their problem. So now at least
The
the Browns
Bears.
have three bona fide starters, including a couple of former first round picks, and signed them to pretty significant, deals. So they've got really, they go from having no offensive line to having 3/5 of their line already shored up. And you got to figure they're going to get a fourth piece in the draft next month.
Yeah, you have to figure that too. But Jim, why does this feel like the offseason going from 19 into 20? New head coach, offensive minded, excited to come here. A GM with renewed purpose. And granted, it was Andrew Berry taking over that year, but now it's Andrew Berry with a renewed purpose of rebuilding this roster. And the focus on offensive line, because remember, that was the year after the Odell trade. That was Jed Wills in the first round. That was bringing in Jack Conklin, re-signing Joel Bitonio, re-signing who's the other one? Oh, he just said he was retiring. He was leaving. The hell's his
Uh,
name?
um, Ethan Posick,
Wyatt Teller.
Wyatt Teller.
So it, it seems to me Andrew Berry is going back in his bag to that 2019 into 2020 offseason, and he is making the thing that screwed the Browns left, right, and center the top priority. Now, I believe with all the moves they've made, you will hear Carnell Tate at number 6 to Cleveland to start shoring up that wide receiver room. We'll obviously get more into the draft from here as we go into our next big live event. But Jim, just one last quick question as we wrap up this with the Browns segment. Um, would they be stupid to not draft Tate there if he's on the board
I think
with
you
what
almost
they've done?
I think you almost kinda have to now just because now the option that you and I were talking about with John last week, briefly was that, if you're not gonna get the kid from Miami at 6, now you've got another option to where you've got your pick between hopefully both of them are still there, and there's a lot of people thinking that they will be, is the kid from Georgia or the kid from BYU sitting there at 24 for you, provided they don't actually end up coming up because you've got Now their draft picks were set, so they've got 4 in the top 70. They hold 6, 24, 39, and 70. So there's definitely, I mean, you're going to get at least 2 starters out of that. Look at what they hit out of the park last year. So you address the defense and you shore up because you're also probably not going to see JOK playing again. I mean, his career is likely done. You shore up the defense. You might get a couple of cornerbacks in the back end, grab another one in free agency to shore up. you know, Now you address the offensive side of the ball. You've got a good young receiver room. Now you just need that one game breaker, that one number one to be able to put everything together.
Yeah, as far away as they are, and I'll say this with hesitance, but with hope. If they hit on Shador like I think they hit on Shador, once they give him something to deal with, like, a line where he's not running for his life, where people can actually catch the fucking ball, um, they're not as far away as people think. And in that division, where one perennial favorite doesn't have a quarterback solution past this year, because I think Rodgers will be back. One doesn't pay anybody to play defense in Cincinnati, but has an offense that'll blow you out of the water. And the other one who chokes everything away come January. It's not far fetched to say 2027 could be a year where the Browns get back to the playoffs and could make some noise depending on how they build this roster.
And last point on this is even if they don't have the guy, think about this. You get, even though you're still going to, now you restructure Deshaun Watson's deal, at least he's off the roster after June 1 of next year, even though you're still paying him into 2028. The cap hit is still significant, but it's not 90 million if you cut him now. You still try to squeeze whatever you can out of him. And if Shadur's not the guy, you've got the class of 2027 that looks like it's going to be loaded as opposed to how thin this year's class is.
Oh, absolutely.
Michael, the best story in the National Hockey League this year is the one team that we never thought was going to be anywhere close. Michael, can you name who is the second best team in the Eastern Conference and currently has the fifth best record in the NHL?
That would be the Buffalo Sabres. Nice.
The Sabres, even though they had their 8-game winning streak snapped yesterday against Washington, which ironically enough, they led that game 1-0 after the first period. The Sabres currently sit right now at 40, 20, and 6, 86 points. They are 2 points ahead of the Tampa Bay Lightning atop the Atlantic Division. The Sabres, when we were on the air last Sunday live with John, the Sabres had won the best game of the NHL season. It was an 8-7 game with 15 goals, 7 goals in the second period, 7 goals in the third period, 102 combined penalty minutes, and 7 fights. And I'm sorry, 5 fights in the first period alone.
And the proverbial partridge in a pear tree at that point in time, because that was just ridiculous.
So the Sabres actually they had squandered a 4-0 lead, fell down 7-5, and then battled back for 3 goals in the final 9 minutes to eclipse the Lightning. And then this was actually Buffalo's second win streak this season of 8 games or more. They had a 10-game winning streak earlier this year. When the Sabres, I want to say it was, when was this? On Monday, December 8th, the Sabres lost to Calgary 7-4. They fell to 11-14-4. Since then, I might be a game or two off on this. The Sabres have gone 28-6-3, somewhere in that range. But it's at least 25 wins, and they have vaulted themselves to that up until yesterday's loss, 40-19-6. So the Sabres had only lost 6 games since the first full week of December.
You know, I don't watch a ton of hockey because I mean we've talked about this, but I have been paying attention. This is one of the best runs I have seen a hockey team get on in a long time because it's not just that they're winning games. There are games where they're winning by one, maybe two goals, where they're playing really good defense, and then you have the game like we were talking about Sunday night, where they just are slapping dudes around. Um, to score 8 goals in an NHL game doesn't happen all that often. And to know that you have a team that not only can score 8 goals in a game if you need them to, but can win a game 2-1, that's impressive.
It's also the 3rd time this year they've done it.
Really?
Their first win of the year was against Ottawa after starting 0-3 on October 15th. They beat the Senators at home 8-4, and then on November 21st, they hang 9 on Chicago at home. Now the thing is all 3 of those games were at the KeyBank Center in Buffalo, where fans start turning up a little bit more. By the time that game rolled around on Sunday night when we were on the air, there was not a seat to be had, and that place probably got louder than the old Memorial Auditorium, which we all remember outside of the old Maple Leaf Gardens and the Joe Louis Arena, and maybe the United Center is one of the loudest buildings in NHL history, the old Aud. The
Oh
KeyBank
yeah.
Center was ready to rip the roof off that place. And I mean, when you look at the Sabres right now, Tage Thompson leads the team with 34 goals, 70 total points. Rasmus Dahlin, 47 assists, leads the team. But Dahlin, there was a lot of people giving flack to Dahlin because he had a terrible week of, he got slashed in the neck a week ago that we talked about that got Evgeny Malkin suspended for 5 games, and then he got dropped to the ice in one of those fights on Sunday night against Tampa. But he doesn't really care because he actually had a couple of helpers in that game, and Buffalo won both of those games. So do you honestly think that your captain is not going to try to go some of the stars from the other team into shit like that and kind of become a little bit of a rat to be able to get them more wins and we got to also keep in mind that he's typically one of the best offensive defensemen in hockey.
Yeah, he's been playing really well, and he has definitely stepped up wearing that C on his chest, being the leader. I didn't realize he was the one that Gino slashed in the neck. I know you said the name and it kind of didn't register. But look, I hope they win. I hope they take this thing as deep into the summertime as they can. What's it been since they were in the playoffs? How
13
many years?
seasons.
Good God.
When the
I hope they
Sabres
get this
won
thing
that
done.
game, it marked the first time since April of 2013 that they had been in first place in a division that late in the year, and
Yep.
that was during Lindy Ruff's first go around as head coach of the Sabres, and they ended up winning the division that year. I can't remember if they got bounced in the first or second round that year. But when you look at the Sabres, their goals against is 13th in the league. They've got the 4th best penalty kill. Their goals for is 6th best in the league at 3.47. Um, I mean, there's not a whole lot of room between them and Colorado for the top in there. And you look at the last 5 years of records 21-22, they finished with 75 points, 22-23, they finished with 91, and basically missed out on the playoffs by, I want to say, 1 point for a late season surge that they had. 23-24, 84 points, 24-25 last season, 79 points. They've already eclipsed last year's total with 16 games left, and they are only 5 points away from eclipsing their 5-year best over that period.
That's impressive. Like overly impressive. Um,
And
I hope they do it. I hope they run away with this thing and they hide. So that way they can get to the beginning of the playoffs and be first of all fully healthy. You want to go into the playoffs as healthy as possible. Not that I think anybody's going to be truly healthy, especially not in the NHL going into what, April.
yeah,
So look, man, I would love to see Buffalo get in this thing. I would love for
and
us to do a Stanley Cup preview and we're talking about your Buffalo Sabres.
And I mean, you look at kind of the move, they didn't make a whole lot of moves at the deadline because they were talking about they were targeting 2 major players with the St. Louis Blues. And it's basically my wall. Remember the last time those 2 teams made a big move at the trade deadline was the year where Buffalo sent Ryan O'Reilly to St. Louis and then goes out and win a cup, later that year. Um, right, that's when St. Louis starts putting their run together after the first of the year where they start climbing in the standings. So Buffalo puts theirs together a little bit before. I'm not saying Buffalo's going to win the cup because of the fact that the 3 best teams in the NHL all are right now sitting atop of the Central Division between Colorado, Minnesota, and Dallas respectively. But the Sabres were targeting um uh Robert Thomas from the Blues, the star forward, but reports were that St. Louis wanted back Owen Power, their number 1 pick from a couple of years ago, who's currently one of their top 4 defensemen. They wanted Jack Quinn and a prospect, and Buffalo wouldn't part with it. Then they started targeting Colton Parayko. They had a deal in place to be able to get the Blues veteran alternate captain, uh, uh, you know, first line defenseman. And then Parayko says, "Nah, I don't want to waive my no trade clause to go to Buffalo, even though because he's also in the first year of a 4-year massive contract extension for him." And then they end up, still pulling um a deal where they end up getting Luke Shen. Ironically enough, the Blues captain Braden Shen gets dealt to the New York Islanders at the deadline. So the Sabres end up getting Luke Shen. They end up getting uh Sam Carrick from the New York Rangers in a small move. Carrick goes out and has a fight and a goal in that game. So Buffalo just makes a couple of little tweaks. They don't go out and they don't get the massive, talent. They've got a lot of their guys under contract for quite a few years. Their biggest offseason priority now has got to be trying to re-sign Alex Tuck, who's Buffalo bred and hometown boy and everything. And a lot of people felt was being passed over for captaincy when it went to Darlene after Kyle Okposo got traded a couple of years ago. But just the beauty of this whole thing is not only did we hope at the start of the season when we did our NHL preview that Buffalo could get in, Michael, is it out of the realm of possibility of saying not only is Buffalo going to get in, could they end up winning at least one, if not 2 playoff series? What's the realistic thing that we're seeing? Are we talking Eastern Conference Finals or bust right now?
I wouldn't say Eastern Conference Finals are bust just because it's been so long since they've been in the playoffs. What I would say is if they can play this way, who beats them in the first 2 rounds? If
Better
you pull the 1
question.
seed,
Go ahead.
you pull the 1 seed, you get one of the wild card teams in round 1, right? Dispatch them. So you gotta
Because
play
if
the
it
next.
stand because if the playoffs were to stand right now, Carolina would end up playing Boston because Carolina has a 2-point lead over Buffalo for the number 1 overall seed, and then Buffalo would get Detroit, for the other wild card, and then you would have Tampa Bay against Montreal, and then Pittsburgh against the Islanders as your other matchups. Let me pose this question before we get out of this segment. Outside of maybe Minnesota or Colorado, who's beaten Buffalo in a 7-game series with the way that they're playing right now in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs?
I don't think anybody. I hope it works. So, Jim, it is also one of our favorite times of the year. March Madness is really going on now as we're well into the conference tournament schedule, but it has happened. As the last remaining undefeated team in the nation, the Miami of Ohio Redhawks, have lost their first game of the year, opening round of the MAC tournament. And, Jim, what a run from that team to get to, what was it, 31 and 0?
31 and 0.
And let me be very plain here. They beat themselves in the first round. They did not lose that. They did not lose to another team. They beat themselves. That big turnover toward the end just absolutely killed them. So, as you and I prepare for our annual bracket episode, which we will get to as soon as the brackets are announced, as we record this Friday night. Selection Sunday is a couple days. Um, where do you see them landing, and do you think there's a chance they get left out?
I don't think the committee can ignore 31-1. Yes, they are, as it stands right now, the fourth highest scoring team in the nation. Yes, their strength of schedule is down in the 200s. It is not good. They're I don't think they have any quadrant 1 wins. I think they've got maybe 2 in quadrant 2, with the new, kind of scheduling and everything, how they've kind of gone away from the RPI, in the last 5 or 6 years or however long it's been. The resume is not great, and the fact that you played UMass twice this year and only won both games by a combined 9 points and on a neutral court. When you were at when and I did I actually wrote my first sports note today in over 2 months, about this, that the first game was in Miami. You only came away with a 2-point win against UMass. You go into UMass and you win by 7. And this actually, the optics do not look good if you're Miami. 31 and 0 is good. It's great. 31 and 1, you'd figure would look good as the MAC being one of the better mid-major conferences out there, but the fact that you lost to an 8 seed where the MAC is one of the few tournaments that has more than 10 teams and not every team plays in the postseason. They only let the top 8 in, whereas any of the other major conferences or major mid majors will actually allow all the teams to play. And then you might have a couple of buys in there, like the SEC, the Big Ten, all the major conferences, everyone plays regardless of how bad their record is. But the fact that the top 8 get into the MAC tournament and you go out in the first round to a team that was only 2 games over 500 and lost 5 of their last 6 to get into the tournament, and the fact that UMass goes out and Toledo beats them earlier today in the first semifinal. So Toledo, it's going to be Toledo, Akron, or Kent, and Akron and Kent are going on right now. The battle of meth labs versus Kent Reed, Kent Wright, Kent State, that we all remember from being in this part of the country here. And we all remember that Akron and Kent have had a very, very infamous history in the MAC tournament the last couple of years, if you can remember,
Yeah.
that we've actually even covered on this show leading up. Um, but the idea that one of those teams is now going to get the automatic bid, but now you're going to end up taking, like in Indiana, a Seton Hall was actually going to be sitting on the bubble until they got spanked by St. John's earlier today. Auburn's sitting there, but Auburn's resume is not great. And if this gets around, Bruce Pearl, shut up. When your homerism basically makes Charles Barkley look impartial, just do us a favor. Go back to being an analyst. Shut up. Um,
Hmm.
Miami has got the ability to get in there, but I will say the biggest drawback for them was the fact of nobody thought that they were going to be a top 4 seed, a top 5. I think the best I saw somebody forecasting them was going to be a 6. Realistically, you were thinking maybe an 8 or a 9 if they were going to run into this thing undefeated. They're going to be lucky if they get in this thing and there's not 2 numbers next to their name. I think if the committee really wants to split hairs and screw them, they throw them in Dayton in the first 4, um, at that point, but I think there would be a better chance that they would actually get, like, maybe a 10, 11, 12, and then maybe the winner of the MAC could end up being one of those first 4 or like a 13, 14. Um, but it definitely did not do them any favors.
No, it didn't. And like I said, they beat themselves in that game. So I think that has to, you know what, that should take and give the committee some kind of pause. Like, hey, they had a bad game. They played their game at the way they played it for the first 31, and they wiped the floor with that team. I will also say this: there are a lot of teams that they're talking about being higher seed than Miami would have been that don't have wins in quadrant two either, or have losing records in quadrant two or quadrant one. So I don't think that's going to really go into this here. I think what you're going to see is, let's see who wins the MAC tournament and where we're going to land Miami. I could see Miami being in Dayton in the first four, if people want to screw them, but I could also see Miami being a 12. I don't know why 12 is sticking in my head, but I think they're a 12 that could beat a 5.
That would be the hilarity, is that of, you know, them getting one of those dreaded 7-10, uh, 5-12, 6-11 games, as I go completely out of order. But, those are the at-large games that nobody wants to be a part of. And as I'm looking at ESPN's bracketology right now, I see that they've got Akron slotted as a 12 right now, and I'm still trying to see where, if they've even got Miami on this board. They actually have Miami as an 11. That so Joe Lenardi is predicting that they would open against Wisconsin um, in the first round, and then Akron would play Vanderbilt. So they are predicting that 2 would get in. But again, there's where the loss to a very, very average UMass team really hurts them. I mean, if they would have at least won that game, and then if they lose to Toledo, yeah, you might end up snagging an 8 or a 9 seed, but now you're really, really on that fence.
Especially if it's Wisconsin, with the way Wisconsin has played in the last few weeks. They have really turned up their game in the last few weeks, and they're going through a good showing right now in the Big Ten tournament. Look, man, I hope Miami gets in there and gets a W in the tournament. Be the first W since Wally Serbiak's year, right?
Correct. Yeah, it would also be the last time since 1999 where the MAC got 2 in, and it was Miami that was one of those that was Wally Zerbiak's team that got to the Sweet 16.
Was that the year Gary Trent got what's its name in there?
Xavier?
No, he wasn't Xavier. I don't remember who he was. When they used to call him the Shack of the MAC.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. OU.
Was it OU?
Yeah, he was OU. So Lenardi right now, and we will break this all down when it's official, as we will be taping probably Monday, Tuesday of next week, and that episode will go live before the first game tips off on Thursday. We won't really, do it with the first 4. ESPN has Duke, Michigan, Florida, and Arizona as your top 4 seeds, and kudos to the defending champion Gators, who started out the year, with a 4, and I want to say that they stumbled out of the blocks. I want to say they even had a losing record very early in the year. And if I want to say with their win over Kentucky today, I think they've won 17 straight.
Oh, it's a ridiculous number like that.
Your 2 seeds right now are Houston, Michigan State, Iowa State, and UConn. Your 3 are Illinois, Alabama, Nebraska, and Gonzaga. And then your 4s are Virginia, Texas Tech, Purdue, and Kansas. I mean, that's a loaded top 16 right there. And I want to say anyone on those first 3 lines is more than capable. Mike, if you actually take your Michigan hate out of this, for as good as they've been this year, who's the most susceptible number 1 of those 4 between Duke, Michigan, Arizona, and Florida?
Arizona.
I think Arizona as well, even though that they were the number 1 team for quite a bit of year. It was them and Michigan back and forth. Florida is on another gear, and I think Duke is right now the best team in the country.
It's very possible, but you can't count out UConn. Hurley is a dynamic head coach. I think Arizona is the most vulnerable because it's Arizona. They always seem to lose a game they're not supposed to.
How ironic would it be is that if the way that this bracket sets up right now, Florida and Houston, last year's national championship game, would end up meeting in the Elite 8 for the chance to go to the Final 4.
Well, let's not give away the next episode we're doing, James.
Would you shut up and just push the button already?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
It's the YC Translator on the Wise Guys Sports Show.
I'm forever unclean.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is the Wisey Translator. It is the best segment of the night because it is the last segment of the night. It is a time when James and I give each other names inside and outside of the sports world, and we give you the first thing that pops into our heads. Didn't have one in the live show because we were really just trying to get in and out with it, with the baseball preview, and of course John being with us. Um, so James, um, it is incumbent upon me to give the first name in the Wisey Translator, and I am going to get your opinion on something. James, your first name in the Wisey Translator is the J.R. Smith of USA Baseball and counting his chickens before they were hatched, U.S. national team manager Mark DeRosa.
Maybe stick to a gig that you're better at, which is like, analyzing with Rob Dibble and Lauren the Hottie Shahadi, and Pedro and everybody on MLB Network. And, you know, um, even though this thing doesn't really mean anything because of how many guys are backing out in the middle of it, um, it really never should have come to this. It's not like at the Olympics where it means anything. It's not like it's a world championship, that's done after the season, like in basketball and hockey. It's it is a novelty, but still know at least what you're doing and don't have to put your faith in Italy.
Yeah. Yeah. Although Italy's manager does hold a very special, one of their coaches holds a very special place in my heart. Did you see who Italy's manager is, though?
If you're saying it's the legendary soccer goalie from the ESPN Gary Miller era Gianluca Pagliuca,
It's Francisco Cervelli.
I did see that. I just wanted to use it. I just needed an excuse to say Gianluca Pagliuca.
Pagliuca. Here we go. As the cats fight in the background.
Michael, you're go ahead.
Speaking of cats fighting, Jim, go ahead.
Michael, your name in the YZ translator had himself a night, what you can almost say a record-setting night. Um, and quite honestly, it could have been even larger if this was like a night where nobody wanted to play defense. And yours is the now holder of the second greatest point total in one game in the NBA, Bam Adebayo of the Miami Heat.
Still the second best player in his house.
I saw that. You sent that to me. That was friggin' hilarious.
So what I said to Jim was the first thing Asia Wilson, who is Bam Adebayo's wife, of course, Asia, the four-time,
Four-time.
WNBA.
You got to say it like Booker T, dude.
Sorry, yeah. The WNBA regular season MVP and now three-time Finals MVP. That's Bam's wife, and the first thing she puts on Twitter after that game was "Time to piss in that cup, son."
And the fact that she continues to roast him in the post-game presser when he's sitting 3 feet away.
Even better. You know what though? They're like goals, the two of them. I mean, seriously, you constantly see him on the sideline when she's playing, constantly see her on the sideline when he's playing. It almost looks like when they sit next to each other, they're literally talking strategy and how to play in that game. And I think that's amazing. But listen, Bam, your wife's got 4 rings, man. She's going for one for the thumb this year.
I mean, more entertaining, and I'm not going to use the word couple, but between NBA, players. Remember when we had Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union basically giving each other crap most of the season
That was the best.
yeah. Or I mean, really how wholesome we'll get it back next year when he returns, but just the wholesome relationship and friendship that developed between Caitlin Clark and Tyrese Halliburton especially during Indiana's run to the NBA Finals last season. But Asia and Bam is a whole nother level because of the fact that they are perennial all stars and basically run their city for their basketball teams. It was wonderful to see.
It really was. And I like I said, it just when she put that on Twitter, I was like, dude, I got to send that to Jim. That was hysterical.
One other name I was almost going to give you, but I will back off of it. Breaking news coming in: Austin Matthews, one of the captain of the Team USA gold medal hockey team, just announced a grade 3 MCL tear. He is done for the rest of the season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Um,
Damn.
yeah. So yeah,
Is that what
uh,
Dangle was screaming about?
yeah. So, well, then again, when is Dangle not screaming? So, yeah. So Bam goes off for 83, and Austin's knee essentially goes bam out the door, and the Leafs now need to find another way to be able to get out of the cellar in the NHL.
Yeah, good luck.